Arab Perspectives Institute, and from Islamabad. I'm joined by Masood Akhtar. He's a retired Pakistani air marshal and now a defence analyst. I'd like to start with you, Zeidon, first. There's a lot of optimism in the air about these talks, but as we know, diplomacy is slow and deliberately slow. Is the best outcome here, do you think, that they keep talking, or do you think the fact that J.D. Vance, the Vice President, is in town is indication that there is a deal?
There may be an indication that Vance's involvement here, taking a step or leading the front seat in these negotiations, simultaneously, Trump being in the picture. Trump seems to have used his rhetoric heavily on social media as a way to use pressure cards against Iran indirectly, given that these talks were not formalized the way they were, despite consistent denial from the Iranian side, while we knew that there were back-channel communications. And eventually, as we witnessed, Pakistan has been preparing these talks and putting commitment and effort into it from the very early days. And as you rightfully mentioned, it was much more unexpected to witness such a level of high talks, let alone if we were to compare it for the past few decades since the establishment of the Islamic Republic. But an interesting element, I think, here that is a bit different from the early days of the war is that given the multilateral status quo of the war, which involved so many parties, not just the US and Iran, but also Israel, that arguably pushed Trump's administration and convinced it and rationalized to it that this is possible without a continued war following the decapitation of the Iranian leadership. We've also got the GCC neighbors of Iran who were directly targeted and threatened by the war from the Iranian side. There is a bit of a narrowing down now with the talks, where you have head-to-head between the Americans and the Iranians. If these talks were to improve and mature later, would they include the other perspectives, or would that happen following a much more formalized settlement from the main two parties? One major spoiler, as have been previously discussed and indicated and observed by so many different political actors regionally and internationally, is Israel. And Israel is continuously trying to prove its point, especially given its assault against Lebanon, which was observed in one way or another as an indirect opposition to Trump's administration for reaching so far with the Iranians without considering their point of view.
Let's get the view from Pakistan now. We have Air Marshal Masood Akhtar. Masood, what I want to talk to you about is picking up on what Zeidon was talking about. Pakistan is put itself, front and centre of these negotiations because it has good relations with the US and Iran and the GCC neighbours. But if these talks don't work out, Pakistan becomes the fall guy for this, almost may well get the blame for this. Are you worried about that?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because there are a lot of expectations out of these talks. No, because the slips between the cup and the lip are expected. But I think right now people have climbed down from their maximalist positions. Let's talk of Iran. Iran will not give in anything on its ballistic missile program because that's a lifeline. Number two, on Hormuz, and number three, on the on their proxies, that is the regional authority. They will compromise on the enrichment program. They will compromise on reparations, but they will not give up their stockpiles. And I think that's what the Europeans want. That's what the world at large wants. And so that is where, and like I said in the first segment in the morning, that probably some bit of ironing out has already happened. Otherwise, J.D. Vance would not have just landed in Pakistan. So Pakistan, yes, should be worried. We will lose some face in case nothing comes out today or tomorrow, but hopefully today by evening. And the fact that your correspondent was saying that J.D. Vance is going to Serena Hotel, Iranian delegation already is there. Pakistan is playing the role basically of a facilitator plus. That's about it. And we have provided a forum for both the delegations to talk. Hopefully they have climbed down. And like we said in the morning, Trump is now looking at very closely at his midterm elections, and he wants a solution right now.
Zeidon, let's talk about the wild card. You mentioned it earlier. The wild card here is Israel. Iran has been very clear. Lebanon or no deal. So they put their cards on the table. But Netanyahu has also been very clear that this is in his backyard, that he wants carte blanche to be able to do what he wants, which is effectively occupy the south. Now, that's going to be a calculation when it comes to the Americans. Do you think, or do you think not?
It depends on how far the Iranians would insist on it. One has to remember that this war transformed into a multilateral regional war, which is why there is a lot of bits and pieces that would eventually be put on the table as we notice these bilateral talks facilitated by Pakistan with the US and Iran. Now, if we were to notice the typical point of view that we usually look at the Iranian proxy network in the region, it goes beyond Hezbollah, right? We've got the Iran-aligned militias known as the Fasal in Iraq. We've got the Houthi movement, which has a bit of a much more autonomous relationship with Iran. The insistence on Lebanon is probably due to its complete and direct association to this war particularly. Hezbollah had a very strong collaboration with Iran during this war. Hezbollah is considered to be the most associated non-state actor in the region with Iran, and it went fully in, it went all in this war, arguably defending Iran against the Israeli aggression. Hence, it would look really bad from the Iranian side if they were to abandon Hezbollah in this war. However, it will be very hard to believe that if the Iranian were given a guarantee that they were convinced and believed in that the national security of Iran were to be protected in the very long term as a guarantee from the United States, it'll be very difficult to believe that Iran would sacrifice its own national security for Lebanon's Hezbollah. But I think another important and final element about Iran's insistence on Hezbollah and Lebanon to be a part of the political settlement is also an indirect test to President Trump to convince the Iranians that he's able to control Netanyahu in the future. Because if a settlement between the Iranians and the Americans happens today, what would guarantee the Iranians that Trump can limit Israeli attacks against Iran after a US-Iranian settlement?
Air Marshal Masoud Akhtar, one of the questions that people who don't understand how the power dynamic in Pakistan is the relationship between the army and the civilian government. The civilian government here have been involved in mediating these talks, but it's been the army that have really had the real influence. Why is that?
I answered this question in the first segment. Unfortunate, but true, that since our independence, our politicians do not seem to have done well. So that's why we had 4 martial laws, although the generals were also to blame. But the politicians must strengthen themselves. And the reason that we became an ideological state, democracy tended to take a back seat. In an ideological state, there is no room for different ideologies to talk to one another like it happens in the West. So when some bit of vacuum was created, the army walked in, and ever since this has not been corrected. So we have to strengthen our democracy. We must become a good democracy. Unfortunately, the Islamists are the strongest element in Pakistan. And the politicians are, number one, not too comfortable with them, and they do occasionally get fearful of them. So the moment, if they don't strengthen democracy, they don't become competent by themselves, the army will have the say. Like I said, they have pretty much few more ideas than the politicians.
Air Marshal Masoud Akhtar, Zeidon Alkinani, thank you so much. We'll be coming back to both of you during the day. Now,